Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Andrew sent me a note. So Steve, check out this story. I believe it's a trifecta. It's a topic you like to talk about. It involves the Institute for Justice. And I saw it on Gizmodo, which is a sister site to Jalopnik, where you used to write. And I said, you're right, my friend. Now, I did get this from a whole bunch of other people. Thank you very much. I just now pulled the press release from the Institute for Justice's website. I'll put a link to them in the description below the video. Federal lawsuit challenges Virginia City's use of over 170 cameras to conduct prolonged, warrantless surveillance of the entire driving population. Now, this is interesting because this isn't the only city that's doing this. These systems are now used in more than 5,000 U.S. communities. If it's not happening near you, it's coming soon. Dan King wrote this. 2 Norfolk area residents teamed up with the Institute for Justice to file a federal lawsuit against the city, challenging the constitutionality of its massive vehicle surveillance system, which allows police to monitor the comings and goings of all drivers in the city. The 2 argued the program violates the Fourth Amendment rights of all citizens, and this is used in thousands of communities across the country. One of the plaintiffs is a 42-year-old husband and father who recently retired from the Navy. I don't like the government following my every movement and treating me like a criminal suspect when they have no reason to believe I've done anything wrong. Another plaintiff is a 44-year-old home healthcare worker who lives in Portsmouth. My work requires me to drive around Norfolk very often, and it's incredibly disturbing to know the city can track my every move during that time. In 2023, the city police partnered with a company called Flock Safety to install 172 automatic license plate reading cameras across town. And some people, I'm sure, have already wondered, wait, Steve, I see security cameras everywhere. You go inside a building of security cameras. What's the difference? Well, the different thing here is that, number one, it's outdoors. Number 2, they're reading license plates. It's not just recording what happens. They're also reading the license plates and doing stuff with that. The cameras were strategically placed to create what the police chief calls a nice curtain of technology. A nice curtain of technology, which would make it difficult to drive anywhere of any distance without running into a camera somewhere. Unlike traditional traffic cameras, which capture an image only when they sense speeding or someone running a red light, Flock's cameras capture images of every car driving by, which it then retains for at least 30 days. So again, the difference is that if there's a camera there and all it does is record people who run a stop sign or a red light, well, that's different. Or a camera that just gets you when you're speeding. Artificial intelligence, and hey, where could that go wrong? Then uses those images to create a vehicle fingerprint that enables any Flock subscriber to both track where that vehicle has gone and identify what other vehicles it has been seen nearby. So what vehicles does your vehicle associate with? They know. They've created a dragnet that allows the government to monitor everyone's day-to-day movements without a warrant or probable cause. This type of mass surveillance is a blatant violation of the Fourth Amendment, says an IJ attorney. And it's not just Norfolk police who can do this tracking. Because Flock pools its data in a centralized database, police across the entire country can access over 1 billion monthly data points. That means not just tracking drivers within a particular jurisdiction, but potentially across the entire nation. So they could say, hey, there's this vehicle. We just saw the vehicle. I wonder where else it's been. And they can ask the system, has this thing popped up anyplace else on your system? Yes, it has. It was over here, then it was over here, then it was That's disturbing. Following someone's every move can tell you some incredibly intimate details about them, such as where they work, who they associate with, whether or not they're religious, what hobbies they have, possibly even medical conditions they might have, says IJ senior attorney Robert Frommer, who I've met, by the way. Great guy. This type of intrusive, ongoing monitoring of someone's life is not just creepy, it's unconstitutional. All of this happens without any judicial oversight. The police can access Flock's database without a warrant and can view, save, and share any data prior to its deletion. Nothing about the operating procedures requires the officials to establish probable cause or get a warrant before searching the system. Worse yet, the police department's policy actually requires police to log into Flock and utilize the technology throughout their entire shift. It's no surprise that surveillance systems like this have been repeatedly abused. In Kansas, officials were caught using Flock to stalk their exes, including a police chief who used Flock 228 times over 4 months to track his ex-girlfriend and her new boyfriend's vehicles. In California, several police departments violated California law by sharing data from their license plate reader database with other departments across the country. And as is the case with other databases, these can be susceptible to hacking, which can then reveal private data. Several other local municipalities, including Chesapeake, Suffolk, Hampton, Newport News, Isle of Wight, and Franklin, also use flock cameras. The company allows these departments to share their data with one another or any other police departments across the country that use flock. In May of this year, a state trial court held that Norfolk's system lays a dragnet over the entire city and that prolonged tracking of public movements with surveillance serves to invade the reasonable expectation of privacy citizens possess in their entire movements. And so I know some people are going to say, but Steve, the second you step out your door, you are in public, you can't expect privacy. Well, that's a little different than being photographed and tracked and having the data stored and analyzed and artificially intelligenced about you every time you're out someplace. And so I think this is kind of like a spectrum, okay? And this right here is one far end of the spectrum, okay? Other courts, including the U.S. Supreme Court, have ruled that the use of modern technologies for prolonged monitoring of someone's every movement is a search under the Fourth Amendment and thus requires a warrant. In Carpenter versus U.S., the Supreme Court held that accessing historical cell phone location data was a search requiring Fourth Amendment protections. Relying on Carpenter, the Fourth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals held that a surveillance program in Baltimore, which captured aerial photos of 90% of the city every second for at least 40 hours a week, was a search because it afforded the city retroactive access to a detailed encyclopedic record of every person's movement in the city across days and weeks. This case is part of IJ's project on the Fourth Amendment, which seeks to protect the right of Americans to be secure in their persons and property. IJ is litigating several challenges to warrantless searches of private property, including in Louisiana, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. In New Jersey, IJ is also challenging the bulk collection and prolonged retention of newborn babies' genetic data without parents' consent. And so there's a whole bunch of things going on there. This, like I said before, I think is problematic. And it bothers me to be living in a surveillance society. Everywhere you go, everything you do is being recorded. And on the one hand, we've got the internet and a bunch of things like smartphones tracking our every move already. But when the government starts doing it, that's an issue. Because remember, there is, Constitution, Bill of Rights, that kind of thing. Fourth Amendment, as they point out more specifically, that you should be allowed to just go about your life and be left alone on some level. And just, again, to make sure this point is there, yes, when you walk into a bank or you walk into a post office, there's probably a surveillance camera. One, you know it's there. Two, it's just recording what's happening, okay? Is it actually photographing you and running that, information to a database to figure out who you are and tracking your moves and then sharing the information with other people? And that's the problem with this network. And so I'm sure some of you are familiar with the book 1984, ironically, which is now ancient history, but when written was about the future. And parts of the future came true before 84, and parts of it are coming true after. And so you could be living in one of the cities that has this system, and you are then constantly under surveillance when you're out and about, which is, I think, quite intrusive. So we'll see what happens. The court will rule on it. And I suspect this is the kind of thing that will literally take the U.S. Supreme Court to straighten out, meaning that you're going to get some conflicting rulings from different circuits, and it's going to take the U.S. Supreme Court to go yes or no on whether or not this is a permissible thing for the government to do, and that is literally to track all vehicular traffic in a city 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and not just photograph it, but analyze it and calculate it and then share the information with other people without warrants is a serious issue. And I always like to point out that the Institute for Justice is a nonprofit, and they do a lot of work that otherwise would not get done because people, generally speaking, can't afford to take cases like this to the U.S. Supreme Court. And so who's going to look out for the rights of the people who are concerned about this but can't afford to chase it. And so the IJ does that, but they survive entirely off of donations and support from people who believe in the work they're doing. So I always tell you that if you find this story interesting and you think they're doing good work, please support them. I put the link in the description below the video. And even if you can't support them financially, you can support them morally. Just give them moral support. What I mean by that is you can go and bookmark their page, subscribe to their newsletter, because that's one of the ways I find out about these things is people say, Steve, I just got an email from the Institute. So Andrew pointed out that the story got picked up by all kinds of other people, including Gizmodo, sister site to Jalopnik. And so the story's out there now, but please support the Institute for Justice. They're great people doing great work. So Dan King wrote that press release. Federal lawsuit challenges Virginia City's use of over 170 cameras to conduct prolonged, warrantless surveillance of entire driving population. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. I haven't slept for 10 days because that would be too long.